Hello, everybody, and welcome to Documentary Club, a place for documentary lovers. I'm Jeff Jones, and with me, as always, is Jack. Like and subscribe if you enjoy our discussions. You can join the channel to help support us and get perks such as advanced notifications on which documentaries we will be covering next and new clips before they go public. Today, we're talking about the state of Alabama versus Brittany Smith. But before we get into that, I'd like to formally welcome in Jack to the show. How are you doing? I hope you're feeling well.
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me, and welcome to everyone that's in the live chat following along. It's an interesting case that we're looking at today. It's a bit different cut, state of Alabama versus Brittany Smith. It's shorter. It's pretty much cuts right to the heart of the matter of what's going on in the case. Should be an interesting discussion.
As you said, it is a shorter documentary. In fact, when I was looking online, they actually referred to it as a short. They don't beat around the bush much. They get right to the point in the 40-minute documentary. And, the last few weeks we've been covering some 4-part series and 3-part series. And I thought,
Yeah.
let's just do a one and done kind of thing. And we'll have maybe a shorter episode today. But there's a lot to talk about in this one short episode. Did you have any opening thoughts that you wanted to deliver before we get started?
Well, I mean, yeah, there's some events surrounding what they describe that I have questions about. I will get to them when we get to that point. That they're just my questions. Maybe other people say, what, you're just being a little anal about it. But I do have questions about this case that we don't really have explanation for. So yeah, that's and it's interesting. The decision by Brittany to the decision she made early on after she was accused in this crime of the direction she wanted to try, and all of that discussion. So
stand your ground, basically. I mean, that's the underlining current in this documentary about stand your ground. And I don't want to jump too far ahead, but one of the main points that comes out in this documentary, and we'll probably get to a clip about it too, is how stand your ground law is used successfully in defense of violence, including murder. But the main point that this documentary points out is that it seems to benefit white men more than women and minorities. And the numbers are kind of staggering, and how white men tend to win over the jury on this one, and women and minorities tend to not successfully use stand your ground, at least in these cases that we're talking about, at least in the data that exists. And so that's one of the takeaways from this documentary. The story of Brittany Smith is basically she defended herself in her home against an attacker and was charged with murder.
Yeah, that's right.
I was arrested for murder. The man was in my home, as if I wouldn't have my brother and I would both be dead right now. If they let me tell my story, I believe that I'll win.
I've covered stand your ground cases before, and almost all of them, they were men. And so the police may go to a scene, find that someone's been killed, and then they'll just say it was justified. In Brittany's case, she was charged with killing a man who she accused of raping her. The most compelling thing to me was, are women able to use the system to defend themselves in the way that men are?
And the question that I have is, when you think of stand your ground, I would think that just my guess would be that women might use that more than men. Like, it might be kind of tailored to women who are the subject of more assaults. you would think that a stand your ground law would be kind of more tailored towards women, but it's the completely opposite.
It's the macho side of the stand your ground, not the feminine side that's, getting beat and attacked, and
Right.
probably more often than men do. I was a little surprised to really find out what this reporter had found out about actually how the law had been applied and used, mainly for white men. That's
Right.
crazy.
It's interesting, and it's good that she did the digging and crunched the numbers on that. Now, is it fair to say that it's just that's just the way it is, or is it that these suspects, these men, tend to be more believable to a jury, or we don't really know? And I think the only thing we can point to is the outcomes. Is that white men specifically, are more successful at using stand your ground laws than minorities and women. And do we
Right.
have an exact reasoning on that? Not really, but we can show that the data does support it.
And she's had some hardships being a single mom. And then depression, it really hit her hard. Baby Will had Potter's syndrome. It's a genetic disorder. When she lost a full-born child, Brittany went out left field and found peace somewhere else with addiction. When she lost child custody, she hit rock bottom. She relapsed a couple of times.
Losing a child and then kind of falling into addiction, you kind of can't blame anybody for that.
It happens. It's it's a really it's like I can tell you personally, it's like getting shot. I guess it's like getting part of you just cut out with a hot knife, and you just have to learn to deal with that and learn to live with it. So and I can't give birth. I can only imagine for a mother, and the pervasiveness of what we've seen in small town America in the last 30 years. Drugs of one form or another have flooded in because there's a market there.
Drug addiction, it's a disease. You're predisposed to addiction. For most people, addiction is a slippery slope, right? And it spreads across all types of people. It doesn't care who you are. It doesn't care if you're, wealthy or poor. However, people who tend to be on the, poorer side of the economics,
They're compromised.
yeah. And so if you're financially compromised and you're down on your luck, it's a lot easier to search out drugs. And that doesn't mean that wealthy people don't do drugs. They just tend to hide it a little easier, to be honest.
Well, they can, but
Yeah.
someone looking to ease their pain, it's not
There
an
you go.
outlet to drive that pain into another direction. And the
You need an
drug,
escape. You need an escape. And I
thank
get
you.
that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if someone like Brittany didn't have social services, or, postpartum depression is a real thing. And then if you were to lose your child,
Yep.
I mean, I would think that would be an automatic, we need to put you in therapy automatically, right? You lose your kid like that, you need to talk to someone, right? You need,
some people can deal with it. It's hard, but they can they can deal with it because they have the mental capacity and they have support within their own family. But some people can't, and Brittany was one that could. This is January 15th, 2018. This is the day, or I should say the evening of the shooting. Because of her addiction and the problems that caused, she lost custody of her children. And she's on the verge of getting them back. She's worked really hard she's working and doing whatever she needs to do to get her kids back. And she wants to get them a puppy, a dog. That this guy is selling, he has several pit bull puppies. So she gives him a call, and she's supposed to meet him. That doesn't happen. So she calls him and says, where the hell are you at? And he says, well, he can't leave, and I'll still do this, but you got to come pick me up. So she agrees. She goes and picks him up, brings him back to her place. Well, apparently he's had some kind of problem and he's been kicked out or whatever. He didn't have a place to stay. So she tells him, you can stay here for one night with me, but after that, you got to go. You can't stay here. During this evening, she's talking to him about her kids and so forth and so on. He just suddenly jumps up and attacks her, starts to choke her, and he assaults her. Now, she first said that he didn't, but later she changes that. There are a lot of problems that stem from this very day that follow her to the end.
To be fair, there are some circumstances in here that don't look good for Brittany.
Not at all, because of some decisions that were made very quickly that really come back to really bite on the ass.
I get a call from Todd asking if I would come and get him from the park. All right, we'll come and get you. You can stay on my couch for one night, but tomorrow you have got to leave. We talked for a little while, and then something snapped inside of this man, and he jumped up and started screaming at me. So I take off running through the hallway to my bedroom. He busted through the door and started choking me. And I thought, this is what it's like to die. God, please don't let me die. I woke up and my pants are off, and he's raping me. And he says, if you say one effing word, I will kill you.
Brittany called, I guess, about 12:40, and she said, Mom, will you bring me a pack of cigarettes? My hair was wet, and I was like, Chris, can you just go take your sister to the store to get some cigarettes?
I get up, and I head to Brittany's house. Todd comes out behind Brittany. Brittany gets in the front seat. I drive over to Matco. While she's in the store, me and Todd are talking in the car.
And Brittany comes in. She looked like she'd been in a fight. What happened to you? And then that's when she started telling me what happened to her. That she had been raped, beaten by Todd Smith.
After a minute, she comes out, and I go to pull off to take them back home. And Brittany, before she gets out, she tells me that I need to go back to the Matco to talk to one of the clerks.
And I started telling him, and he was like, what?
I always had my pistol right here on my side. I went in the back door. I told him that he needs to get his stuff and leave. I put my gun on the counter and try to physically remove him from the house.
I run into the kitchen and they're fighting. Todd has my brother choking him out. I picked up the gun and I said, Todd, stop, please let my brother go. And he wouldn't. So I fired the gun and nothing happened. So I shot again. Well, the third time, my brother and him fell down.
It's a hell of a scenario, and this is where I run into some issues completely buying everything that happened, because there's more that takes place after this, of course. But number one, okay, everything leading up to the brother coming into the back door, I can fairly well, I guess, go along with. But then when the brother gets back, he's got the gun, and he doesn't pull it out and say, get your shit and get out of my sister's house now. Yeah, set it on the counter. I'm having trouble here.
Why do you do that? Why do you
Yeah.
set it on the counter? Yeah, this is where I get hung up a little bit too.
Having problems there.
And it seems like that's a sticking point where, I'm not saying that that's not what happened, but it just seems fishy to me. He says he's always got his gun holstered on him. And then when there's a confrontation, he puts it in arm's reach of a potential
Maniac.
hostile. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The other part that I want to pull out of here is that when she shoots him, it's not really a stand your ground from my point of view.
Well,
stand your ground is when you're being attacked and you fight back with lethal force. Maybe that the case shouldn't have been used on that defense. You know what I mean? Like she was like, no, I shot him because he was going to kill my brother. Yes. Is that stand your ground? That doesn't seem like to me, it doesn't seem like the right defense.
It touches on it. I don't know that it's fully a stand your ground, but I guess in the sense of I was afraid he was not necessarily going to kill me at that moment, but my brother, because he was choking him out. Right. I guess it kind of lends itself a little bit that direction, but I don't know that I don't know how specific the law is written. I've never read it personally.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so I think that's where you and I are kind of in the same place, where we're seeing some issues arise. Yes. And it's not a clear-cut case.
I would have been far more in the other direction if she would have told that store clerk, please call the police and send them to my house. This guy has assaulted me. My
Yeah.
brother is in the car with him. I'm afraid something's going to happen. I don't know what's going on. But send the cops, please. I'm not saying he didn't assault her. I think he did, because we learned more about him personally and what was going on with him.
Initially, Chris takes the blame. The brother takes the blame. He says he shot the guy.
Yes.
But then Brittany wakes up the next morning and she says that she's kind of had a
Epiphany.
night to sleep on it. She has an epiphany. She has a realization, and she says, I can't let my brother take the blame for this. If I did it, I need to face the facts. And then she goes straight to the law enforcement and explains, no, you know what? I know I told you that. I was in shock. This is what really happened.
Yeah, it was me. I need to correct my story.
That's going to be a red flag for law enforcement too.
Sure.
Although maybe it shouldn't be as bad as it seems on the face. If you're in shock, you say and do things that you normally wouldn't do, and you almost got to give people a little bit of grace period there. Oh, you know what? You came the next day and you admitted that you lied. I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt.
Especially, I can't really speak for anything, and I can't speak to this wholeheartedly, but for a woman, it's really difficult for them to say that they've been raped or sexually assaulted. They just don't want to reveal that to somebody they don't really know. They don't want to admit it to anyone, but especially to someone they don't know and probably don't really trust.
So in this next clip, they kind of talk a little bit about stand your ground.
Typically in the South, stand your ground, it's men standing up and protecting their life, liberty, property, all of this. If a woman does that, or a minority, it's viewed a lot different. Why is it okay for a woman to sustain injuries and continue to endure that before something's done?
I'm hoping that this goes through, because it shouldn't just be a law for men.
When he was attacking you in your house, did he still have permission to be there? No, sir. Were you afraid he would hurt you? He did hurt me.
There were 2 abrasions on the left side of the chin, and they were consistent with a bite mark. And then she had a contusion that was consistent with a handprint. I would say my findings were consistent with a strangulation.
Her story is corroborated by her injuries.
What? So he did rape you? No, he did not rape me. He was trying to.
I can see how they're going to jump on that and say he did not rape me.
Yeah.
And this is the 911 call. Well, she's under shock. She's in shock.
That's right. Anybody that's been assaulted, I mean, guys can be assaulted too, especially children sexually assaulted. They just don't want that out there because they're afraid people are going to look down on them, but like they've done something wrong. It's just a real problem. So
I agree.
Todd Smith had very high levels of methamphetamine in the system, extremely high. If you see a video and there's somebody trying to be restrained by the police and there's 5 officers and they're tasing him, they're hitting him with the clubs, and the guy just keeps fighting like Superman. She said that is similar to what that level of meth in your system would produce.
Well, that would explain why it took 3 shots to bring him down.
Yeah.
And why the first one, she's like, nothing happened. I shot him and nothing happened.
200 is kind of normal. He was at 840.
4 times that normal level.
Right.
In the Superman kind of range.
Well, I mean, to hear his cousin talk, Jeff Poe here, he talks about that.
I asked him one day, I said, what does that make you feel like he's a Superman? A totally different person than if he hadn't been for drugs.
There are definitely dozens of arrests here. Some of these are domestic violence charges. During the Stand Your Ground hearing, what repeatedly brought up by her prosecutor, Jason Pierce, was the question of, is Brittany credible? Brittany initially just reached out to her mom. She didn't call the police.
That night, when she called me, he held it on speakerphone. He could hear what she was saying. because he didn't want her letting anybody know what had happened.
Brittany said, give me a piece of paper and a pen. And she started writing down names and phone numbers. She said, if something happens to me, Todd Smith did it.
Somehow you believed your mother would be in a better position to handle violent, angry Todd than a police officer?
Around here, usually women get the short end of the stick.
He said, if you call the cops, I'm going to kill you. So she's just trying to get a call out to anybody to intervene somehow. Like, I don't know what I
Yes.
can do. I can't call the cops, but who are you going to call? Your mom, your dad, whoever's, your friend, whoever you can really trust in a situation like this. And I can see how the prosecuting attorney was trying to kind of bend that a little bit and be like, you think your mother is more capable of dealing with this than a law enforcement officer? And it's
Right.
like, I don't think you're listening to what I said. He told
Right.
me he would kill me if I called the cops. I
Well,
can't
he's
call the
victim.
cops.
He's victim
Call them
blaming.
up.
Yeah,
Right.
he's victim blaming. He's shifting that. Like, she did something really wrong by not calling the cops instead of trying to get out of the situation any way she could without getting freaking killed. This guy's jacked up. He's clearly wound on meth. Way the hell up there.
Yeah, someone with that much meth in their system, they are unpredictable. Let's just put it that way.
I guess, one of the things about this, and this goes back to the beginning when he called her to come pick him up. I'm a little bothered that she would agree to let him stay at all. I mean, I don't know how well she knew this guy. I'm going to take it for granted she didn't really know him at all. A lot of women reached out to her, not just from that county, but other places too, about similar instances they'd been through with, being assaulted, cops not, believing them or, whatever. So there was quite a bit of movement in the social media world for Brittany. And then, of course, there's a hearing about the stand your ground. That they presented this. She wanted this immunity with the stand your ground law, and so that had taken place, and they're waiting on a decision. That comes to a little bit later.
There's been so many women reach out to me and share their stories. Everybody reaching out to me, telling me that they've been abused and that they've went to the police, but the police wouldn't make an arrest. The stand your ground law is for white men only, from what I've seen. It's not for minorities. It's not for women. And I don't think that's fair.
But when you get a ton of little nobodies together, especially pissed off women, they become somebody big. We have a voice. We're fixing to use it.
And it'll turn someone into an activist overnight when you see these kind of injustices, and or maybe your opinion out there is that they got it right. I don't want to tell you how to think about this case, but from the documentary's point of view, she was put into a horrible position, and I think they do bring up a great point continuously that white men get away with this kind of defense more often than women and minorities. Yet to really quite understand that, I think it's something to dig into. I think it's something that needs analysis and review. Stand your ground laws are already quite controversial in their own existence. So there's a lot to unpack, just where a case like this lands culturally, legally, etc.
Of course, we don't have access to, all these different situations where stand your ground is used. But I think the ones that we have seen, it's typically the white male that has used this immunity and gotten away with it.
Judge Holt issued a 19-page order denying stand your ground immunity.
Did Todd attack Brittany Smith? Well, it seems pretty clear that he did. Of course, that's not when Brittany Smith shot Todd. That's the issue, and I think the judge thought was an important factor when she denied our motion.
The court finds that the defendant has given inconsistent accounts of the events surrounding Todd's death. And so I think it was pretty clear that the judge did not believe her testimony.
I hate that Todd had to get shot and killed over, but I really do believe she's defending herself. I don't want to see her go to prison. I really don't.
It's not the law per se that needs to change. It's our perceptions of how we think women should fit into the mold.
My attorneys showed me the last offer, and I was just like, what would you do? They said I would take it. My kids are okay. I'll be okay. I'm trying to just stay sane back here.
If she went to trial, the judge who would sentence her if she was convicted is the judge who had written a 19-page order questioning her credibility. She described it to me was that she took kind of the lesser of the evils and took the plea deal.
Do you play Russian roulette with people that you don't even know to decide your fate? So I understand why she took a plea agreement.
I do too. I think she did the right thing to take the plea agreement. If you're looking at 18 months,
Yep.
Time served 18 months versus a life sentence, I think it's a no-brainer.
She had to go on house arrest for several months after that, but still, she got out. And I think she made the right choice. I would have taken the plea deal.
After you lose the immunity hearing, you don't have much of a choice. You really don't have much of a choice. Trust with the lawyers. The lawyers do it every day. They're like, I would take it. You know what I mean? I'd take the deal.
Yeah.
If you stick out with the judge, she's already questioned your authenticity, and it's not going to be a good scenario. You're probably going to get more. You know what I mean? Just take the deal and move on with your life. You may or may not have been justified, but as she said, you get a 6-month sentence for killing this guy. That seems like not much. You know what I mean?
Right. I think she did the right thing. She made several mistakes. We talked about that. There were several things that come back to haunt her because of what they told the police originally.
Mm-hmm.
Now, whether they would have believed whatever or not is a different story, and how women are treated. That's a separate kind of thing. But to create this false narrative to begin with, that hurts your credibility so bad.
She's been raped and beaten by him and almost killed, and now she's been raped and beaten by the system.
It's like no matter whose side you were on, I don't know that you really will find justice in this story.
Women are twice as likely to be convicted as men when claiming self-defense in their homes.
Yeah.
Like that's the underlining part that's shocking to me, in their homes.
I didn't know that. That's a really shocking statistic.
I think this documentary, honestly, it brings up more questions than it answers or gives us a resolution to anything. I'm kind of in a mixed bag here. I feel like, is there a scenario where Todd could have lived? I don't know. A guy lost his life and she did 6 months in jail and some house arrest. Sometimes it's a mixed bag. Sometimes
there's just no good resolution.
There's just no good resolution. Yeah, I don't know. And as I said earlier, I'm not sure that the stand your ground law, and it's just that an attorney kind of, said this, was the stand your ground law the right defense for this case? I'm not 100%. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm just saying from face value.
Yeah, I'm with you. I agree.
I'm in the heat of the moment, had she grabbed the gun while he was on top of her, it's cut and dry.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I'm not sure stand your ground was the right defense to try to get that immunity. I'm not convinced of that, because stand your ground is, as I understand it. Again, I've never read the law for any particular state, but it could be pretty specific that the threat has to be to you,
an imminent,
right,
and to you,
not extended to a family member or a pastor, a friend, or whatever. It has to be.
You're not standing your brother's ground. You're standing your ground. Stand your ground. Right.
That's right.
And I think we're in agreement there that there's a little bit of a gray area here, and that could have played into it. I think that played a part in the outcome here.
If that judge would have upheld it, now there's been a precedent set. That's not to say that the state wouldn't have appealed it, because they probably would have. But even if she kind of agreed, or that she definitely agreed that this guy attacked her, she didn't want that precedent, her name tied to that precedent of saying, okay, I'm going to allow this immunity. You're good. You're good to go.
You know, it says there's research has been done that shows that, you know, white men are successful at using this stand your ground law and other, you know, women and minorities aren't. That's a separate issue, I think, ultimately here. And I think that's something that needs to be dug into, the statistics, and have an analysis done of each case and try to figure out, why is that? Is it
Right.
because the jurors are more likely to sway? Is it because just the culture, is one of the, you know, one of the subjects of the documentary said it's the culture. People just don't believe women. They were saying in the area in Alabama, you believe the man more often. The woman's word isn't taken for. I mean, in this day and age, I find it's such a foreign, especially where I live, it's such a foreign idea that you would be like, no, just whatever the boyfriend says, that's what happened. You know what I mean? Like, it just
Well,
seems so old. It seems like that's
yeah,
1950s, not 19,
yeah,
not 2020, but
it is that way. You get into the backwoods of these small towns across the South. I mean, it's not just the South.
mhm,
I won't say it's not predominantly,
mhm,
but it's that way in a lot of small towns, rural
absolutely.
communities.
Yeah.
But it just is.
Do you have any other closing thoughts on this documentary overall? You know, short one, 40 minutes. You guys can finish this one off probably faster than you can finish off our podcast.
Probably. Yeah, I think we pretty much nailed the highlights. I voiced my concerns. You have to, but I think the larger questions may be left better for the live chat. Get more input from our lady listeners
Some
that
ladies. Absolutely.
yeah, because this topic is really more geared towards them than it is the guys.
Sure.
Now, I can't. I mean, I can't imagine. If I were to, this day and age, as you said, where we are now, 2024, if there was some issue between me and some female here, whatever that may be, that I would be believed more than she would. I don't have a problem there. I'm not saying it couldn't happen. I'm just saying I think it needs input from the other side too.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's a really
Yeah.
good point. Yeah, so overall, I really enjoyed this documentary, but like I said, I think it brings up more questions. It kind of leaves it open, and I'm going to be excited to talk to some of the folks in the live when we have the live discussion, because I'd like to hear your input, especially of the feminine persuasion. I'd like to hear your input about what you think about this.
Absolutely.
So yeah, really cool. State of Alabama versus Brittany Smith, eye-opening documentary. Really quick for you guys if you want to finish it out. That's pretty much, I think, all we have for today. So this has been Documentary Club, a place for documentary lovers. I'm Jeff,
And I'm Jack.
and we'll see you on the next one.